Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's SANS webcast, Beyond Compliance, Tips to Deliver Engaging Application Security Training, sponsored by Secure Code Warrior. My name is Carol Auth of SANS, and I will be moderating today's webcast. Today's featured speaker is Scott Russo, Cloud Security Manager in the banking industry. If during the webcast you have any questions for our presenter, please enter them into the questions window located on the GoToWebinar interface at any time. Please note that this webcast is being recorded, and a copy of the slides and recording of this webcast will be available for viewing later today and can be found on the SANS registration page. And with that, I'd like to hand the webcast over to Scott.
Thank you, Carol. So before we begin, I do want to thank the SANS Cloud Security Group for hosting the webcast today, and Carol, appreciate having you here to moderate for us. So, what are we here to discuss today? The topic is Beyond Compliance, Tips to Deliver Engaging Application Security Training. My name is Scott Russo, and also want to thank our sponsor today, Secure Code Warrior. So let's dive right in. So first off, who is this webcast for? I think you could read the title. And thinking of or tasked with creating an internal application security training program. You're looking to go a little bit beyond just a compliance checkbox and actually have your developers really engaged and interested in what you're teaching, and you're hoping that your training will grow.
Scott, it's Carol. Excuse me. Your audio cut out for me for a moment. Were you just reading that slide to the group just now? I'm just making sure we didn't miss anything.
Yes, indeed. We're just going through this slide. Yeah, thank you for letting me know. Please give me a heads up if that happens again.
Yeah, if I hear it again, I'll come on and have you switch to telephone, okay?
Perfect. We can definitely do that.
Webcam, it happens like that.
Yep. All right. So summarizing the slide, basically, if you're looking to build an application security training program and you're primarily technical and you're hoping it's going to grow and scale into the hundreds or even thousands, you're in the right place. And I also recognize if you're here because primarily you want to get a CPE, I hope you'll also get some interesting stories out of it. All right, so let's go into the agenda. So when coming up with this agenda, I was really thinking about what advice would I give myself 10 years ago. So throughout my career, I've jumped between hands-on with cybersecurity in one way or another, first with industrial systems security, then with AppSec and pen testing, and then finally now I'm currently in the space of cloud security. But with each jump in between, there was some time I spent in education and training, definitely a passion of mine. And these are kind of the things I wish I could tell myself 10 years ago. So really broken down into 4 topics. First was how to create an engaging story. Really, how do we keep our audience interested and aware of what we're doing? Key decisions. So 2 that have come up frequently in my career was buy versus build and optional versus mandatory. Applying basic marketing principles to training. So especially if you're going that optional route, how do you get people to actually come to and take your training? And lastly, attracting a community of instructors. And on that one, I've only really got a couple of short points to make, but I think they're very important. So let's dive in. So for these polls, it's just to think about it, because I'll be honest, a lot of them are kind of leading to a specific answer. But we're going to start talking on engagement, but let's think about this. So of these 4 items, which do you think is the most important elements of a successful training? Is it the A, the training results that you get, the survey results you get from the training? B, the technical depth of the material? C, the audience engagement? Or D, the applicability of the learning? Can they use it in their job? So what I would actually contend, they're all important, in fact, so there's no wrong answers here. But I'd actually contend that the most important thing with our training is to make sure it's engaging. We either earn the attention of our audience early on with any training program, or we can lose it. So I'd want to start there, and here's my thoughts on how to do that. So first things first, A good training session should be like a story and have all the elements of the story. And I'm going to actually show you what I mean with that, some real live examples. But I think about, what does a good story do for me? And maybe if you think about what's your favorite book, or maybe it's a movie or a video game, generally, I think the trend is the best, most memorable ones are the ones where we went in thinking one way and we came out almost feeling transformed, like we realized something new that impacts us. So to me, that's kind of the best stories I've ever seen. And that's the same thing we want to do with our training. So I'm going to show an example with OWASP Juice Shop of how I might go through a story, and we'll talk about each of the elements. Now, in a actual, I'm training someone on application security, I would break this down step by step, have the audience follow along with me. You're welcome to follow along with me at this link if you like. But what I'm going to be doing on this webcast is actually talking a little bit more about the process rather than each individual step. We're going to do SQL injection, but the training's not really about SQL injection. So let's dive into Juice Shop. So the first thing of the story was the setup. So what we got to do is describe what is it we're looking at here. And so we'll tell the audience, hey, this is an example of a typical web store, kind of silly. It sells juice and juice accessories. And it's rife with vulnerabilities. So that's kind of our setup here. One thing I will note on Juice Shop, there was a time in the past where I liked to build custom hacking challenges to make sure I could show exactly what I wanted to show. But since Juice Shop has come along, it's such a deep training tool that with so many vulnerabilities, you can tell any number of stories. The other thing I like to acknowledge at the beginning is I know that developers typically coming to an AppSec training, they have some myths that they believe. Things like security is not their job. They might think, for example, there's a static analysis tool that's going to find everything for them, or any other number of misconceptions. So really, while I'm going to show SQL injection, it's not the point of the story. And when we get to the end, I'll reveal the point of this specific one that I'm going through. But just know that it's more of the feeling I want the people to come away with than it is the individual items. So as part of the setup, I'll go to the account login page, and this is something they probably have in their own app or familiar with, right? They know how login page works. We'll show them, hey, I'll enter test, click login, invalid email or password, kind of what we expect to happen if I put invalid credentials. Next thing I want to do is I want to show them, well, what would happen if an error occurs? So I'll open my developer tools, get this nice and ready, and I'll enter a single quote. Our typical, we're going to try to break something, see what happens. But when I click login, they see this object, and this is still all the ordinary setup, right? So an error occurred, 500 error. That's suspicious, definitely not what we want to happen, but let's see what it tells us. So we look, okay. We can see it actually in the error code provided us the SQL query that was formed, still part of the setup. And I'll ask the audience here. I'll ask them things like, do you see any issues with the SQL query, or can you describe to me what this is doing, and get them involved in talking. One other thing I'll have them note on this particular story. What does this password look like? So I entered test, as you might remember, but we got something different here, a string of letters and numbers, right? So what is this? And my hope would be eventually someone in the audience says, hey, that looks like an MD5 checksum. And so all of these things, we kind of just, maybe we write them on the whiteboard, but we note them down. And maybe we can be vague and say, this might come up again, it might not, we'll see. So next part, so we've done the setup. We'll switch to what is called the conflict, the next part of the story. And what we want to do is we'll enter your typical SQL injection string, and some from your class may recognize this and say, yep, I've seen that before in some compliance training I had to took. Remember, this is beyond compliance. But many are going to recognize this. So we'll enter this, click login, and congratulations, we have made it into the admin account. And this is a good time to check on the knowledge of your learners. You'll ask questions like, why did we get in the admin account? And inevitably, someone will you'll get a description of how SQL injection works, and someone will chime in with, hey, it's because admin's the first entry in the table. And this is a good time, again, to keep checking their learning. We're dispelling minor myths along the way. So you might ask something like, okay, so what if we put a dummy account in the first entry in the table? Would that fix this problem? And hopefully the majority of the room answers, no, 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 that's not how it works. So you give them a task now. And this is the climax of the story. You ask them, all right, I have a specific task for you. I want you to use this SQL injection and get into Jim's account. Now, depending on how much time you have with them, you might leave it at that and kind of let them wild, give them 5 to 10 minutes. You might note that, hey, notice that we can find the account name by looking at reviews, for example. Depends on the audience and the amount of time you have. So then, give them the time. They'll come back, and someone will inevitably get it in the room. Say, yeah, I got it. So you'll call them up. You say, okay, can you show the class? And they're going to do something like this. And I can't always promise it's the same. Every now and then they surprise me with different ways that they've managed to log in. But they'll do something like this. And you've got to enter a password to get the field to prompt. That can be anything. Log in. They get into Jim's account. You say, congratulations. You give them a prize. I like to give them a branded item or something. And the climax is now complete, but you're not done. So this is the key part here. So at this moment, although you've brought them along on an interesting example and they're getting more excited and they got to interact and building energy in the room, you still have this so what kind of question in your audience's mind. So I've seen SQL injection before, or why do I even care about this? Isn't there something that should stop this? And what does all those little pieces matter? They really haven't grasped the so what yet. So that's where you have to take it further. And maybe your audience, depending on their capabilities, they may be able to follow you along or not. But in this particular story, I then take them to Juice Shop's search API. And again, that's the beauty of Juice Shop. It's so filled with vulnerabilities. We have lots of opportunity here. And you can show them the API. Once again, it's like a mini setup within the story. You can show them, hey, the API, it's got everything in there, that you see on this front page. This is kind of the back end feeding it. You can search. One thing I noticed was pretty cool with the latest update. They've got a face mask in there, so kind of acknowledging the times we're in today. So you can show them how it works. But ultimately, what you're going to want to do is an advanced attack. So I saved these strings because one thing I will advise, if you're ever doing hacking examples live, the bane of your existence will be mistyping like a comma or a single quote somewhere, and then your demo not working properly. So although it's a little cheesy to have it all prepped, I highly recommend just keep them on hand in an easy copy to paste location. Now I'm going to cut this story a little short. What I would normally do is walk through, because the question is like, how do you figure out, like, if you want to steal data from this database, how do you figure out where it is? So you've got a nice command, you can actually get the database schema. But I'm going to kind of skip down to my typical conclusion, is to enter this string, which gives you all of the usernames and the password hashes. And this is where you bring it all together. So highly advise one other thing. My next step is to show them how these password hashes are cracked. One quick thought for everyone on the call. I do not recommend having everyone in your audience go grab a password hash cracker and try this themselves. Anyone working in a corporate environment will probably immediately understand why I'm saying don't do that. If you want the incident response team to be calling you up in the middle of your class, that's a good step to take, but otherwise you probably don't want that. In any event, what I normally will do is I'll have a table, it'll show all these hashes, and I'll show like how long did it take me to crack each one of these, and what is the password, and oftentimes the audience is surprised how quick that is. But what it shows you is it ties back in that piece with the MD5 checksum. And really our conclusion here is what we're really the myth we're trying to dispel is actually the one that comes from television. So a lot of your developers, their concept of how a hacker works or how cybersecurity works is what they've seen in TV, which is like, oh, 3 clicks and I'm in, right? And it's almost creating this myth like you know what, the SQL injection was serious, but who cares about the error message? Who cares about the MD5, like, and all the rest of this? You know, as long as I take care of that one big thing, the little things don't matter. The general point of this story is to show them we picked up these breadcrumbs along the way. We learned about this system, and that is what let us actually have a system compromise. And my goal with this story at the end is to tell those developers and help them truly understand we can't just think about the criticals and the highs. We've got to be thinking about those lows and mediums too. Each piece of this matters. So that's my story. And then I usually have about 2 more that I'll go through, just dispelling different myths. I love to dispel the one about, hey, the static analysis tool is going to take care of everything for me. And by the time I'm done and we're fully resolved, we're at the point where they're like, okay, I really care now, and I'm ready to learn about secure coding and make this, this is now important to me. All right. So hopefully that was interesting, and that you can kind of come up with your own fun stories. Like I said, OWASP Juice Shop is filled with great opportunities for those. So we're going to switch gears a little bit. So you've got your audience engagement now. Maybe they came to this awesome course where you did this, or you did it as a small webcast. And now they're like, hey, I really want to make sure this doesn't happen to me. And so you've got to have a training program for them. So let's dive into those key decisions first. And I like to talk about buy versus build. So what comes to mind when creating requirements? If you had asked me a while back, I would probably come to the conclusion of, hey, okay, first things first, I need to come up with a spreadsheet that lists out every single technical topic that I need to cover. And I got to find a training that's going to satisfy that. I also need to make sure I identify the smartest people, have subject matter experts teaching, because otherwise, they won't be believable. I've got to build custom content, and it's got to meet everybody's individual needs. And once I do all that, it'll be perfect, and I don't really have to do anything else because people are just going to come to it. And probably, like I said, you've already figured out that is definitely not the way to think about it. So how do we think about it? Because that line of thinking brings us to the classic mistake, and it's not limited to learning or an AppSec training program. It can really affect any program that we might have. Building software, for example, it's the I'm going to go build it because buying I'm only getting 90% of my needs. And I think probably most attending this webcast, you already know, that we need to avoid that mistake if we're going to have an effective program. So when to build? Well, I've come up with these are sort of my 4 questions. You can add more to this, certainly to help with the decision, but these are kind of my core ones that I like to think about. The very first one, is this knowledge or skill unique? It really would make 0 sense to go out and get secure coding training for Java, right? If that's what you're trying to do, there's tons of training material out there available for that already. No need to build that. But then if you're looking at, for example, hey, there's a specific pattern that we need to follow within the company to do authentication with SSO integration. That's now unique, and maybe that's a good time to build. Second, are we willing to take permanent responsibility? So one of the things I've learned from each training program that I've built is that once you build it and people start to uptake it, they will constantly message you with, hey, this content's got out of date, you need to keep it up to date. Let's say you're doing the SSO one, just as an example. The SSO integration pattern will change, you got to update right away. And then I like to use like a 10% rule. Generally, 10% of your audience is going to start asking you questions on any given week. So maybe you train 30 people, all right, that's 3 people, not a big deal. 300, 30 people, starting to tax my time, but maybe I have a big enough team I can manage that. You hit 3,000, suddenly you have 300 people that are active in your Slack channel or whatever it may be, and that gets a little bit out of hand. So bearing in mind, if you build it and you do get them to come, they're going to ask you questions, and you better be ready for that. And I will say the death of your training is if you don't respond. Third thing, are you willing to be rated based on survey feedback? And I think that's a good question. This is the differentiation between, am I doing this professionally or is it just a hobby? If it's professional, just like anything else in your job, you would expect that the result of your training is indicative of your performance. And then finally, do we understand learning? So this is a key piece. In my later attempts, the ones that were more successful and had thousands of people coming to it voluntarily, the difference here was, well, one of many, that I wasn't going it alone. I had lots of learning experts with me. So not only were we bringing the technical piece to the table, we had graphic designers, we had these learning experts who could help advise us on, we're trying to teach professionals, these are adults. They have certain expectations, courses need to flow in a certain way. So having that knowledge on the team was very critical in actually making something that was good, not just because it was technically sound, but it was sound on the principles of learning. So if you meet these things, and it is a high bar, then it's time to build. Now, my next question is, all right, if you just saw that, you're probably thinking, this is excellent proof that I should probably be buying and not building. And truly, that's going to be the right answer in a lot of cases. So the question is, how do I figure out what to buy? Earlier, I gave you my naive version, but here's what I've learned. This is kind of my 5 features to look for in any training tool. And you'll notice one that you might expect is actually missing, but let's talk about the 5 here. So it's got to be interactive, rewarding, it has to be able to validate the learning, it has to be tunable, and it has to be expandable. But the interesting part is, one thing I didn't include was it has to be comprehensive technically. And there's a reason for that. So if you do find a training vendor and they are just knocking it out of the park on all 5 of these, I guarantee you, if your one problem is, hey, I'm just going to make some like Java and Python and C++ covered, and they got Java and C++ but not Python, they're probably going to be in a good place to actually add the one language you're missing. So, just, like I said, 90% rule applies here. And really important, no training tool is set and forget. So even if you decide to go with this buy option, a lot of what I'm going to cover later is important. Again, even build or buy, there's no guarantee that your learners are going to come running to take your training. So you do have to figure out how to get it out there. All right. So to go into this, I'm going to use examples. Again, thank you to our sponsor, Secure Code Warrior, who provide me with lots of fantastic examples of doing it the right way. So I want to use them as how to explain each of these items in a little more depth. So interactive, I mentioned start with a story. This should really be your entry point to your AppSec program, something to get people excited and ramped up. They want to learn now. But you have to maintain that engagement. If you have this great, like, join me and we'll show you how to do exploits, and then the next thing is, all right, now here's 7 hours of video, have fun. You're probably going to lose them. And God forbid if it's, and now here's 20 pages of reading, good luck, right? So that would be that there's no interaction. There is actually a flip side where you go too far. I've seen a few training tools where it's like, all right, cool. So now what you're going to do is, here's a bunch of code bases that have vulnerabilities. Find them, fix them. We're going to run unit tests and tell you whether or not you got it right. And while that is incredibly interactive, it does create a very high bar of entry. So your beginners, which will probably be a lot of your audience, they're going to be kind of scared to jump in. And what I found is Secure Code Warrior really hit it right on the head, where you're in code, but it's more like multiple choice in code. You select your code blocks and you have lots of options. So it's that right level of, you do have to interact. There's no tuning out to get through this training, but we're not going to scare you away. Next thing, hold on, I need a quick drink. So next thing, rewarding. So this is another really important point. Especially when you're doing self-paced training, what's going to keep someone coming back? And I love the couple of features here. So first off, the statistics that keep points and your rank and your badge goes from beginner to security aware to eventually being a champion. This is great stuff. I will be honest, it's not the kind of incentive that works on me. That I have different reasons for re-engaging with training, but I've seen a lot of learning audiences. They love this. They want to be that top rank, and they keep coming in, and it's the gamification and that rewards as you go. The other cool thing is the tournaments. So while the statistics, they're always there and there's always a number to work towards, the tournaments can make it more real in any given moment, in that you can, invite your learner audience to join, and then incentivize them with like the first top 3 people get a $50 gift card. It gives them a great reason to keep jumping back in. Learning validation. So this is one that we're going to talk about this a little more later, but it's one of those things that in my early career I had said, you know what, we'll think about learning validation later. We'll get the training out and then we'll go to that piece. But what I've learned is you need it right off the bat, because inevitably, if you want your learning program to grow, you have to have the buy-in of your senior leaders, and you're not going to get that buy-in unless you can prove that people actually learned. You can always measure a metric of how many people took it, and that's great, but the question will be, but did they actually get better? So I love that these assessments they're just built right into the tool. You can make pre and post assessments to show they actually made progress. But this is a key piece, and it's one of those that like you may ignore it early on, but it'll come back to bite you if you did. So I love that you've got that here and it's all customizable, which leads me to the next point, is tunable. So not only are the exams customizable there, but the courses themselves are. And this is quite important. If you think about, I keep going back to my SSO example. Let's say that's your case too. Broken authentication isn't a big issue for us because we always use the same pattern, and only a very small team actually cares about knowing the details of how that works. So you could adjust that right out of your content. Maybe that's not included in our core training. It also gives you the opportunity to do things like adjust for difficulty levels. And you'll want to do that if you want to take a multi-tiering approach. So we'll talk about that multi-tiering later, but it's really great because if you need to separate by like beginner, and then you've got, those are your developers that just joined or early in their career, and then you've got some seasoned developers, they know this already, you can really tune this so that they have multiple steps they can go through that kind of raise the bar each time. So love that that's there. And then finally, this is one of those things that I ask about, and then I don't touch it for a while, but when it comes up, you realize why you really need it. So expandability, you're going to need to build and automate if your program goes to scale. So perhaps like think about it like this. Just one example. Let's say you're going to send an email to people's managers every time they complete a certain milestone in the training. Maybe you send them a PDF or something, and cool. So your first 50, no problem. Just make those, print a PDF, send those emails, great. When you start getting into, okay, we had like 200 people this week complete this, gets a little bit tedious. So either having some kind of integration with your learning management system, or in my mind, even better, and I admit I'm a bit biased because I do write Python code. Just automate it, write a quick script, and then boom, you've taken something that had become a massive manual effort and just simplified it greatly. So I love having this kind of API right there available to me to just address whatever may come my way that just helps me solve those problems at scale. So let's move on. A lot of great features there. And the next question that comes up in my mind all the time is, any new training course I'm creating or new training programs, should it be optional or mandatory? And by now, it's probably clear that I'm a little skewed towards saying you should start off optional. I mean, it's even in the title, right? Beyond compliance, and compliance courses are typically mandatory. But I think I want to change how we think about it. So you really got to think about it like this. It's not about, is it optional or is it mandatory? Do I need to make a decision as to when? And I'm not going to go through every point on this slide. Some of it's going to come up later as we talk on other points. But the bottom line is this. When you first create a training, do you really want to force it on people if you're not sure it's great yet? And when you introduce, you want to get feedback. You want to be able to rapidly iterate. And that's a great time. It's optional. We incentivize, participate. Hey, first 50 people, and those are by far the hardest to get. We will send them a gift card when they complete the survey, things like that. Maybe we send them some other things to grow our brand. But the point is, once we get past the intro, we get to this growth phase. The growth phase is really folks are seeing your program, they're hearing about your program. Maybe a colleague completed it, and it's now they're getting kudos for it, and they want it. You get this natural growth if you've got the right content and you've got it pushed out there. But at some point, during the maturity phase, and this is just your typical product life cycle, it reaches what I like to call critical mass. So if you think of it like this, let's say, I'm just going to make a note, we have 1,000 developers. So your first 50 that go through and earn this, they complete the training, whatever it may be, they earn it. It looks good for them, right? That's different. That's something special. They get recognition for that. First 250 still getting recognized. First 500, yeah, at least you're in the first half. After that, and the magic number is not 50%. You'll have to figure that out for your own training program and your kind of company culture. But at some point, you have so many people who've earned or completed that training that it's no longer a benefit. It's more like you're behind. So basically, that may be the point where you say, all right, if we want to keep going on and we want more people to get certified, you'll see this plateau in the numbers of people getting certified. Time to make it mandatory. And that, like I said before, is when you need to come with your metrics, your proof that people are learning and there's value. Because if you need that buy-in from your senior leaders, you got to be ready. So to me, I wouldn't think of it as should it be optional or should it be mandatory. It's more like when should it become mandatory. All right. Now, applying basic marketing principles to training. So there was something that happened between my let's just call it journey number 2 into cybersecurity education and journey number 3. And that was I earned my MBA and it totally.
Am I the only
flipped on
one
its
who
has
lost
everything to do with
Scott's audio for a moment there? I lost your audio again for a moment, Scott. I'm not sure if it's just me or if it's happening to other people.
Carol, are you able to hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now, and someone else did reply that they lost you. Okay, I think we'll have you switch to telephone if you don't mind.
Sure.
The audio tab. Yeah, you'd click on the button that says phone call. Yeah, okay, it's not just me, it's the rest of the group too.
Okay, how long did we lose audio?
Or you could just stop sharing your webcam and that would probably take care of it too. It's up to you. All right, well, while Scott is reconnecting, please note if you have any questions for him, please enter them into the questions window at any time. And then also a copy of the slides and recording of this webcast will be available for viewing later today and can be found on the SANS registration page. It looks like you might be reconnected.
Hi, Carol. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sounds great. Thank you.
Fantastic. So what did we miss?
It was about 15 seconds worth.
Okay, good. All right, no problem. We will just keep going on from here. Thank you, everyone, for your patience while I got switched over to the phone. All right, so we're going to dive into marketing principles. So we'll go through this poll quickly to catch up, but I don't know where everybody stands on marketing, or probably we don't have too many folks that's their kind of domain. But I want to acknowledge a couple things. One, totally get if you're in the stance of thinking, hey, what does marketing have to do with this at all? Maybe it's an internal program. I'm not selling this training and there's no pricing or anything. Totally get that. I think another myth we often see is marketing, like I'm going to create my trainings, then I'm going to market it. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. We're going to talk about, I just added this one because you get the developers that say, hey, security is not my job. And I think it's easy to say, as a technical person, marketing is not my job. And then finally, this is my opinion, and maybe I'll convince you, maybe I won't, that it's actually one of the most important things that you need to do. And that, like I said, buy, build, whatever it may be, you've got to get that training out there, and this is kind of the key. So this is a quick primer, just what the heck am I even talking about marketing? We're going to really ground ourselves in the classic marketing mix, and in case there are any real marketing experts out there, I will acknowledge there's other stances on the marketing mix, but we're going to go with the 4 Ps today. So real quick, the 4 Ps are product, price, place, and promotion. They make a lot of sense when you apply them to like something I'm going to sell in a grocery store. But the question is, how in the heck does this apply to training? So let's talk about that. So first off, when we think about the product, I want to introduce a concept called the value proposition and do that by example. So I think Uber, to me, has one of the best value propositions like written up. You can Google their value prop, and I don't know if you'll find this same one anymore. They may have very well changed it, but this, at least this, if it's not today, this is what it used to be. So Uber is the smartest way to get around. One tap and a car comes directly to you. Your driver knows exactly where to go, and payment is completely cashless. So if you look at it, it breaks down into 3 pieces. The first one is relevancy. Who is it for? And they're basically saying it's for anyone that's trying to get around. And what does it solve? And basically they're saying, like, if you are smart and you're modern, like, you'll want to use our platform there. Relevancy. So it's really saying it's who it's for. Then it says gives you parity. So that's the part that's, and the car comes directly to you. Your driver knows exactly where to go. What parity means is like, what I need a framework to think about this, right? So like, what's it similar to? So they're basically telling you it's a taxi, but it's like better than a taxi. But if you want to think what it's like, it's a taxi. And then they've got to do some differentiation, and they have a couple of things here of the one tap and the payment being completely cashless. So they're saying to you, it's going to be really easy to work with us. It's going to be right in your mobile phone. You don't got to worry about how to split your cash for tips. Easy. So that's their value prop. And why is the value prop important? If you think about it, it's like defining what you're trying to do right out the gate. And this is where I say marketing actually starts right away. You should make this, when you're coming up with your new training program or your AppSec program, make this right away. Define what it is that you're trying to do and for who. It will save you a lot of pain later because you won't go building parts of your training that are irrelevant or for an audience that you weren't trying to serve. And the other piece is, if you know why it's different, and remember, the key, you go with optional. If it's optional, you're actually competing not just against other cybersecurity training they could take, but you're competing against any training. Maybe there's like a really cool machine learning thing they want to learn, or maybe right now they're really digging cloud. So you need to have a differentiator. Why should they take your training? If they've got limited time, why is that investment going to be worth it? So let's move on to the next. So think about that early on, and you will be much more on track for developing it. Now, price. So this is the one that it's like, this is weird, right? Like, especially, a lot of folks, you're building an internal AppSec program. More than likely, you're not charging individual people to take it. Some cases you may be, and some cases that may actually be desirable. But for most people on the call, probably the payment is actually, you want to think about the time that folks have to invest. And it's from 2 perspectives. One is how long are people willing to spend learning the topic, but also how long is their manager going to allow? So this is oftentimes one of your biggest limiting factors. An early me would have said, yeah, okay, I want to do training on secure coding. All right, so let's see, Java, I got to cover all these topics. Okay, to do that, I'm going to take 4 days. That's kind of younger me would have said that. Wiser me realizes managers are not going to give me 4 days. They might give me 4 hours if I'm lucky. So in reality, it's not about being comprehensive. It's about saying, what can I fit in the time that my learners are willing to give me? And what are the key topics to cover then? And then secondly, perceived value plays a part in this as well. So there's got to be this matchup, both between how long the training is and like what people expect. And I'll do the extremes here. So like in 30 minutes, you got a 30-minute training, all your learners are really going to expect is just give me a quick overview, maybe give me some resources to learn more on my own. But if you go for 1 week, what do you automatically think? You think like, okay, I'm expecting I should earn a certification. I should be able to pass some comprehensive exam. We're setting a different level of expectation, and you need to align whatever you're delivering to that expectation. Otherwise, it will create confusion from your learners. And then on the question of does the cost matter? So I'll just put one thing out there. Even if you're not charging the individual learner, the cost can matter because in their head, they might be thinking things like, there's this cool boot camp I want to take and that costs some thousands of dollars, but your training's free. Automatically, they think the boot camp must be better because there's more money. But there are ways you can convey to them that this was an investment, and it's important to do that so they don't just automatically discount your program as, it doesn't matter because it's free. All right, place. So this one's interesting because in the traditional marketing world, like literally this could be, where am I putting this in my grocery store? My eggs are in the back of the grocery store because I want to force people to walk through and see all the other stuff and make impulse purchases. But that's not how it works with learning. With learning, we're typically talking about modalities. And I'm going to put like the 3 that I see as most common, but understand there's hybrid versions and other modalities that do exist. But generally, put them in these 3 buckets. There's self-paced, virtual instructor-led, and instructor-led. And what we're doing here is what we call a virtual instructor-led. So basically, we're going to look at it in like kind of 2 categories here. So the top 3, scalability, availability, maintainability. How easy is it to build and maintain this program? Self-paced is going to win out there. Now, one thing I want to highlight with self-paced is limited by support. Sometimes you'll hear people say it scales endlessly, like there's no problem, go as big as we want, but be careful because that may be true into the hundreds. You get into the thousands, and again, the 10% rule starts of the 10% will be asking me questions any given week. Suddenly that thousands becomes a little bit overwhelming. So bear that in mind. It's not unlimited scale, it's limited by support. But on the flip side, you do instructor-led and you're going to have much smaller classes. You're limited by physical constraints. I can fit 30 people in, people have to travel. So that's kind of how you can look at those. But you should also look at engagement and perceived value. So this is very important. Generally, how someone's going to look at your training, if it's self-paced, they're going to think, well, one, from an engagement perspective, they can easily get distracted or start multitasking or like they leave it and they kind of forget. They definitely cannot do that in instructor-led, and any good facilitator that's teaching will keep people engaged, keep their attention. Perceived value as well. People feel the investment if they're in a physical classroom. There's someone teaching me. Maybe you're buying them lunch. They're just catered. So they feel all that and they perceive that value as higher. And then in all these cases, the virtual version is somewhere in the middle. Now the cost one is interesting, and I put it as all questions because it's not really. It's the barrier to entry cost that I have listed. Like with self-paced, you can get a self-paced program up with the least amount of investment. But don't get me wrong, you can actually invest a lot in self-paced training. If you think about, like, maybe I want to add a cyber range on top, and maybe I want to add some exploit exercises, and you can definitely go wild and invest in any of these. So this is more the barrier to entry cost, but not necessarily the final cost. All right, so keeping those in mind, let's talk about tiering and continuing ed. So you may think like, okay, I showed you the 3 options. The question is which is best, and probably figured out by now. My answer is always like, there's no best. It's just what's best for your situation. So it's going to depend on the audience, which learning modality is best. You'll have people, and usually it's interesting because it starts the same. It says, I'm too busy, so, and it may end with, I prefer to be able to take training at my own pace. Or perhaps it ends with, so I really like to be in a room with an instructor so that I have that time dedicated. So it's kind of funny. It ends up with both. But you'll end up with some different learners will be in different scenarios. And in our current time, right, we have work from home. So we also have this constraint of, hey, we need things to be virtual. So my answer is, why not all of them? And you may have to start somewhere. I will say in that case, self-paced, again, noting it has typically the lowest barrier to entry, can be a good choice. But you trade off for, if it's actually in-person instructor-led, you can get in-the-moment feedback. So tiering actually lets you meet different learners' needs and even create different experiences where maybe we only offer self-paced for like the prep course with the beginner stuff. But when you want to get more advanced, maybe that's when we have an instructor-led course, or we send you to a SANS course. So you can definitely tier your training program out. It doesn't have to be one thing. And then what about after the learner is done? So I'm going to just hit this one quick. definitely something to think about early on. You gotta think continuing ed, right? And just like you would with any certification program, you gotta have some way to keep people coming back. We know as security experts, the field is constantly evolving, and if we train them once and a couple of years pass, there's new knowledge they need to gain. So that's where that whole rewarding piece, somehow to keep them engaged, is important. Now, I have a question. So this last one is a thing I never tried, but I want to throw it out there for some brave soul to try and maybe contact me after and let me know how it went. So my certifications are all like, I look at it as the continuing ed sort of punitive. It's you don't do this and we're going to take it away. Don't repass the test, we'll take it away. Don't spend 120 hours and we'll take it away. I've always wondered, why can't it be more like an airline program where there's tiers like silver, gold, platinum? So maybe I have a busy year and I don't have time to jump in and do a lot, but don't take away that I passed, right? But maybe you don't give me the platinum. But then if I do engage, you kind of keep rewarding me. I've always wondered, can we do it that way, or does it truly have to be a takeaway? If anyone tries that, definitely report back. I'd love to hear how it goes. All right, the last of our marketing topics, promotion. The key with promotion is that you've got to build belief in your brand. Like whatever this product is you've created, you made your value proposition. You said this is for whoever, developers, and it's, this is the unique value, right? You got to get people to believe. So when you first introduce it, this is very important. You want to have some budget set aside to invest in branded items. So define a brand, stick to your brand, and be sending these items out as people take it and complete your training. Things they're going to put on their desk. Right now, virtual badges are good because we're not all in the office. But when we're back, think about like, is there a little trophy, a certificate, a shirt, a sticker for their laptop, whatever like fits your business culture. Get those out there, congratulate them, do as much public congratulations as you can. Because what you're trying to do, you're trying to get other people to notice your program and start to recognize the name. First they're like, what is that thing that was built? But over time, they're really figuring out exactly what it is. As you get into growth, this is where competition comes in. So really, I'll jump to the second bullet here. I think it's incredibly important to get competition, but not just at the individual level. So we've got a tournament, and I want to be number one on that. But I like to make the leaders compete. So make something like a Hall of Fame. Again, this is where maybe an API that you can pull data from to keep it live can be helpful. But I want to show like, here's each department and their leader, and here's how their department is doing. And the goal is to kind of send this subtle message like, hey, by the way, Department A, I see that Department B is well ahead of you. They're 30% ahead of you in terms of doing this. So you want to build that up to get people to compete. And support that with all kind of fun things like posters, events, competitions, to really sell that like this is a robust program. And then when you finally hit that third phase, so that's maturity, things start to level off. This is, like I said, where you may start thinking, time to switch from optional to mandatory. It's a different audience now that you're trying to prove something to. Probably your C-suite, but it like depends on your business, right, and your company. So what they care about is they want proof. Like, why should we invest? You got all these people to come to you, and that's great. But did it matter to them, or did it matter to our company? Are they smarter coming out? So that's where I say, even though maybe the learning validation piece comes in here to give that proof, if you wait until then, it will be too late. And I will say that all these previous incentives that I mentioned and that are listed here, they apply throughout, right? So don't stop sending stickers and shirts or giving updates in newsletters. Keep doing that. Maybe you find a department that hasn't engaged with you as much. So you can have these little microcosms of your marketing program and your promotions that re-engage different groups that may or may not have engaged initially. And most importantly, make people feel special. I can't emphasize that enough. That's really a key part here. Even when it turns to the point where, hey, most people already have it, celebrate the people who get it even after. All right, final point. We're going to come to attracting a community of instructors. And this, I'm just going to hit a couple quick points so we can have some time for questions. So, quick poll. Again, you all probably figured out by now these are leading polls, just trying to make everybody think a little bit. So in your opinion, which trait is more important for a volunteer instructor? Should they be a subject matter expert, or should they have a fun and engaging demeanor? And I'm going to guess you can all probably pick that I would shoot for B, but why is that? So really, like I said, there's 2 points I want to make here. If I had thought back years ago to like early me and things I could say, I would say, you know, you really don't have to go find the truly deep subject matter experts to teach. And actually that might harm you because oftentimes they're way too busy to come teach. What you need to do is actually find the people that are really enthusiastic. They're excited about the training. They want to bring it to others. They are good in front of an audience. And I have a kind of a good reason I've realized in time. This first point here. So theoretically, we built this training or bought it or whatever. We've got this training program we've assembled that can actually teach these materials and teach it effectively. But do I have a course on showmanship? And if you're lucky enough that your company has a course on showmanship, that is so cool. Definitely send some people there, you know, have them build their presence, and that can help you out. But if you don't, just remember, it's sort of the other way around. I can actually get someone to a place where they'll know the material well enough to teach, but I cannot guarantee that I can take someone who doesn't feel comfortable in front of an audience and get them there easily. So I call that showmanship. It's the presence in the room. It's getting people excited. That really, has always to me been the hardest piece to find. And then the second, so that's kind of 1 and 2 on this slide, and then 3 and 4. This is something else I've learned, and something I only encountered at scale with the latest program that reached into the thousands. So I talked about automation, and obviously you can tell it's important to me, and I will try to make everything work in an automated fashion, even writing code when I need. One thing that you can think about is like if I need volunteer instructors, because I'm going to guess that like me, you probably won't have an endless budget to just go hire all the people you need. So you're gonna reach out and find people who are willing to teach it in the company. And then you may be tempted. So you start to scale up and you're thinking like, wow, I need like 30 instructors, maybe more because you know, some they're busy and I need to have backup instructors. So maybe not, now I need like 50 instructors. And you may get very tempted to just say, you know what, I can automate this too. I'll make a sign up form and then we'll make a little place where it'll like people can go sign up automatically for teaching different courses, and that is all well and good. And that will help you to manage the work, but what it will actually do is harm you. And that's one of the things I've learned here. You can automate a lot of things, but you cannot automate building relationships. And the key you have to understand is your volunteers, whether they're instructors, contributing content, facilitators, whatever they may be, they become the face of your training program. They're going to see more learners than you will. And the program will actually evolve how they have their interactions. So yeah, maybe when you have that many instructors and you think, wow, like if every quarter I kind of need to spend an hour with each, and man, that's building up and taking my time, it is worth it because they're the ones who actually are going to become the face of your program. And their energy, the energy you convey to them, and then the energy they convey to the learners, that is that's like how your program evolves. So you want that to be a good energy, excitement, engagement, fun, and the only way you're going to get that is you really do have to manage those as personal relationships and give them the time. So that's my other piece of advice here. Do not try to automate those relationships. Make sure you know your instructors. Make sure you spend the time with them. They deserve it, frankly. All right. So that is the end of my webcast. I hope you all learned something, got some good nugget of info out of it. Do feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I would be happy to chat with anyone after the webcast or answer your questions there. We've got a few minutes, so Carol, I guess we can open it up for a few questions.
All right, thanks for that great presentation. We do have some questions ready for the Q&A. However, if anyone has a question for Scott, please enter it into the questions window now. Our first one asks, how important is C-suite, specifically CIO and CISO, endorsement and buy-in for a successful AppSec, I think it says TRG program?
It is probably one of the most important things, actually. So again, it'll depend on company culture. You may get some leeway to build out a program early on, sort of autonomously, but ultimately, 2 things are going to come from your C-suite. First off is the funding for your program. So if you wanted to take off anything but being like a small little, I can train 30 people at a time, you're going to need that budget, and you're going to have to come with the proof of the value of what you're delivering. But the second thing is how excited people get about your training most definitely correlates with how often your C-suite folks mention it. So those executives, if they are saying regularly, they hear about your program, they endorse it, they mention it, that's what's going to drive people to take your training. So I would say you need to be thinking about those executives. Like, first thing, I would say number one, create your value prop. Number two, make sure you've got your buy-in from your executives.
All right, thank you. How much time generally is needed to create and run a successful AppSec TRG program? 5%, 10%, 50% of your time?
Yeah, well, it depends on what scale, right? I'm going to say this may sound surprising, but 100% of your time. If you really do want to run a successful program and you want it to scale, and you want to get people buying in and not just simply force them to take it for a compliance checkbox, it's a full-time job. And in fact, here's the scary truth: it's more than one person full-time job. Now, you may be able to use some volunteers to help you do content, but you really need those learning professionals. You may need people to support, like graphic design. Don't look at it as like a side job. Treat it like a full-time job, and actually, it's a job for a group of people. I will say it is possible to get things off the ground with a small group, and you probably will have to until you get all that buy-in. So don't be discouraged. But as it gets off the ground, be ready to ask for resources to support you. Be ready to ask for headcount, and don't just ask for technical people. Ask for some learning professionals, and maybe you need an artist and all that. So maybe not what you want to hear, but it is the truth.
All right, thanks. What made you choose SCW?
Yeah, good question. So like I said, you saw my criteria that I went through that are kind of my go-to today. What made me choose Secure Code Warrior in particular? Really, when I got enamored with it was doing evaluations. I saw things like, okay, wow, here's a bunch of videos, and literally I just went with my gut. And what we did some little pilots and things too, but it was kind of like, it's boring. These videos are boring. Not Secure Code Warrior, but all right, then I saw some others, and it was like, wow, this is like, you dive in code, you have to update this code and change it. And I do a focus group, and I thought that was cool. And I do a focus group, and it's like, nobody touches it. They're too afraid to touch it. And when I found Secure Code Warrior, it was like, it just was the zen of being right in between the two, where, hey, you know what? It's cool and interactive. People love it. They're having fun. I can see them having fun. And they're not afraid to jump in. Even though it's in code, they felt that comfort level being able to jump in. So I just thought it hit the perfect mix of interactivity, and that's what first made me excited about it. Of course, there were the other things I mentioned. I will say, when I saw the API was there as well, I was like, good. I just knew in my heart I was gonna need it, and that was another big one that I was like, thank God they have that, because I didn't need it that day, but I knew the day would come, and it sure did. So. Yep. Hopefully that answers the question.
All right, thanks. We'll squeeze one more in. How do you manage the work of each individual with a group of 300 engineers?
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that all clearly.
Sure. How do you manage the work of each individual with a group of 300 engineers?
Oh, okay, I see. Yeah, you mean, I'm going to make an assumption. Feel free to re-ask and clarify. I think the question is about, let's say I have 300 people. They all want to contribute to this training program in some way. And how do I manage that? Well, I'm going to tell you one thing that's really important here. Quantity of volunteers is not the metric you should be going for. Again, it's very tempting. We live in a world where make the number go up sounds good. What you actually want to do is find the ones who are most active, who really are your top contributors. Spend your time on them. Narrow your focus to enough where it's manageable. Don't worry, if you got 50 of them that are great and you can spend some time with them, and that's your limit, great, stick with that. If you need to add some people to your team to manage more, do that. but definitely go for quality over quantity in the group. Hopefully that was what you meant by the question, is how to manage the volunteers. But cool. What else?
Well, I'm guessing that you must have answered it. I don't see any clarification from them. So, well, and with that, we're out of time. Thank you so much, Scott, for your great presentation, and to Secure Code Warrior for sponsoring this webcast, which helps bring this content to the SANS community. To our audience, we greatly appreciate you listening in. For a schedule of all upcoming and archived SANS webcasts, including this one, please visit sans.org/webcasts. Until next time, take care, and we hope to have you back again for the next SANS webcast.
Thank you very much, everyone.